Over 10 years ago, the Thompson family lived in a remote area of Wyoming, surrounded by mountains and dense forests. Christmas in that place was always isolated. Ethan and Sarah, the parents, worked late into the evening, leaving their kids, Jake, Emily, Noah, and the youngest, Lily, home alone. On Christmas Eve, the harsh winds and heavy snow made it impossible to travel to town. The TV was their only distraction. The host appeared on screen, a pale man with a gaunt face wearing a Santa hat. He had a sinister smile and strangely large eyes. "Welcome, children, to my Christmas Eve," he said in a soft yet terrifying voice. "I am Skinny Baby, and tonight, I'll take you to a very special place, the Winter Wonder Woodlands." Festive music played in the background, but there was something unsettling about it all. The siblings stayed silent, watching as Skinny Baby seemed to give a tour of an old, empty house. He talked about presents and fun, but the images were disconcerting. The house seemed deserted, with doors opening on their own to empty rooms. Something felt wrong, but on some level, the siblings were too curious to change the channel. The night wore on, and the atmosphere grew more and more bizarre. Then suddenly, the screen flickered, and the image went completely black. The sound of the music cut out, and silence filled the room. The siblings were tense. What was happening? Just then, the screen came back, showing a giant Christmas tree full of candles and shiny ornaments. Around it, animals danced, but these weren't happy animals. They were deformed, with wide, bulging eyes, and their movements were jerky and violent. The scene became increasingly unbearable. What had started as a simple Christmas broadcast was now taking a disturbing turn. Skinny Baby appeared once more, grinning grotesquely. "Look, the children are having fun," he said, pointing at the distorted animals around the tree. What the siblings didn't notice was that the tree began to move slowly, as if it were in another, darker dimension. As the camera zoomed in on the tree, something even stranger happened. The figures of the animals began to disappear one by one, leaving only a human shape in the center. Gradually, the form of a child began to emerge from the center of the tree, its arms and legs twisted, as though it were being manipulated by invisible strings. The horror set in for Emily, who immediately recognized the figure. It was her brother Noah, distorted but unmistakable. Noah, the youngest, was frozen in fear. His breath quickened and he tried to move away from the TV, but Skinny Baby's words held him in a trance. "You're seeing it, aren't you, Noah? The beauty of the Winter Wonder Woodlands. There, you'll never be alone," Skinny Baby said, laughing softly. Emily and Jake tried to turn off the TV, but the remote didn't work, and the screen kept showing that nightmare. The house around them seemed to shrink. The sound of the wind outside disappeared, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence that enveloped the place. Emily stood up and ran to the door, trying to open it, but it was locked. Panic set in, and she looked desperately at Jake. "What's going on? This isn't normal," she screamed, but Jake was staring at the TV, hypnotized by the image of Skinny Baby, who was now smiling with an empty expression. Then a low, distant voice whispered through the room, "They're here. They'll come." Emily froze. The room was now icy cold, and she could feel something or someone that shouldn't be there. She looked around, but saw no one. It was then that Skinny Baby's laughter grew louder. What had once been a broadcast now felt like a real presence, as if he were in the room with them, watching, waiting. The image on the TV shifted again, and the siblings saw, in shock, that the human figure on the tree was moving. The joints twisted in impossible ways, as if the body were being bent unnaturally. Noah began to scream as his own distorted image on the TV turned into something monstrous, with hollow eyes and a mouth open in a silent scream. In a final desperate act, Emily tried to cover her eyes, but it was too late. The screen suddenly went dark, plunging the room into an eerie silence. The door to the house creaked open, and the storm howled louder than ever. When Ethan and Sarah finally came home, they found the living room empty. There were no signs of a struggle, but something was missing, and the children gone. The police never found the bodies of Jake, Emily, Noah, or Lily. The case became an unsolved mystery, but every Christmas, an old television in the Thompson house would still turn on by itself at midnight, showing the same Winter Wonder Woodlands broadcast, with Skinny Baby grinning from the screen. One by one, family members disappeared, and the legend of Skinny Baby continued to haunt the town. On the last Christmas, someone found an old videotape from the Thompson house. When they played it, they saw a final scene. A Christmas tree decorated with deformed figures and twisted children danced frantically in an unnatural rhythm, their empty eyes glowing like distant stars. In the center of the scene, Skinny Baby's smile, perfect and cruel, grew wider with each passing second, as if waiting for another child to take. On a frigid December night in Elkwood, a quiet town swallowed by winter's grip, an unsettling figure known as Jacob appeared. Pale-skinned with ghostly white hair, he looked like a twisted version of Santa Claus. His face was hidden by a blank porcelain mask, eye holes empty and dark. Locals whispered about him, calling him the Silent Claus. Nobody knew his origin, but his yearly arrival was synonymous with mysterious disappearances, especially of children. Each Christmas Eve, Jacob roamed Elkwood's snowy woods, carrying a large worn sack over his shoulder. Sometimes the bag shifted, as though something inside struggled to escape. The few who dared to watch claimed to hear soft, muffled cries from within. Townsfolk dreaded his presence, for his footprints were the only marks left in the snow, a chilling reminder of those who vanished and a trail that always disappeared into the night. Parents told their children to stay indoors when darkness fell on Christmas Eve. Families locked their doors, shut their windows, and turned down the lights, praying the Silent Claus wouldn't choose their home. But for some children, the Silent Claus was more than a myth. The bravest, or perhaps most reckless, would gather near frosted windows, hoping for a glimpse of the figure who haunted their town's legends. One Christmas Eve, siblings Annie and Luke defied their parents' warnings. Though their mother's words echoed in their minds, they couldn't resist the thrill of sneaking to the window. Midnight was near when they saw him, a looming figure wrapped in a tattered red coat, his mask shining eerily in the moonlight. Jacob stood motionless, his empty gaze fixed on their home, sending chills down their spines. When dawn broke, Annie and Luke's beds were empty, their pillows cold. Their frantic parents scoured the house, calling their names. Outside the children's window, faint footprints led into the woods, vanishing among the trees. The town gathered to search, combing the snow-covered forest in silence, their hearts heavy with fear. Days turned to weeks, but there was no sign of the children or the Silent Claus. The town's grief became a scar, each year stirring the memory of those lost. Elkwood's people grew to dread Christmas, their cheer dimmed by fear. Some spoke of leaving, but others felt bound by a loyalty to protect what was left of their town. As another year passed, tales of the Silent Claus grew darker, his legend haunting every corner of Elkwood. Rumors circulated that Jacob was drawn to innocence, his mask concealing a hunger for fear. Some said he was cursed, others believed he was an ancient spirit. Yet no matter the tale, one fact remained. The Silent Claus returned each year, relentless and unyielding, like a shadow cast over the town's snowy landscape. One bitter night, a man named Henry ventured into the forest, determined to find answers. He was the father of a child who had disappeared years prior, and the Silent Claus had stolen every ounce of joy from his life. With only a lantern, Henry stumbled through the snow, calling out for Jacob, daring him to show himself. But the deeper he wandered, the heavier the silence became. Just as Henry's hope waned, he found an old cabin hidden among the trees. The door creaked open, and a chill seeped from within. Inside, the cabin walls were carved with strange symbols, and the air was thick with an unnatural cold. In a corner, Henry's lantern illuminated something haunting. A porcelain mask, cracked and smeared with old blood, resting atop a dusty sack. Frozen in fear, Henry could barely breathe. A sound, soft but deliberate, came from behind him. Turning, he saw Jacob standing silently, his face uncovered, eyes gleaming with a cruel satisfaction. Henry stumbled back, but Jacob's gaze held him in place, an unbreakable bond between hunter and hunted. Jacob took a step forward, his tattered coat brushing the floor. In one smooth motion, he lifted his empty sack and pointed to it, as though inviting Henry to step inside. Paralyzed, Henry's mind raced with memories of his child, of all the vanished children. His hands trembled as he struggled to fight against the overwhelming terror that gripped him. Back in Elkwood, Henry's absence was quickly noticed, but the townspeople had grown weary. His disappearance joined the growing list of losses, each one a testament to the Silent Claus's unbreakable curse. Fear and resignation settled over the town like a heavy fog, and the legend of Jacob took root even deeper. Years passed, and each Christmas Eve, the story of Jacob echoed through Elkwood. Parents still warned their children, doors remained locked, and windows were shut tight. Yet curiosity lingered, and every so often, a brave soul would glance into the night, searching for that porcelain mask under the moonlight. Jacob's legend became an annual nightmare, a memory etched in Elkwood's history. Those who stayed in the town felt his presence, a chilling reminder of lives stolen and families torn apart. And each year, as winter deepened, Jacob prowled Elkwood's streets, his porcelain mask casting shadows across snow-covered ground. In the end, the Silent Claus claimed his victory. Elkwood lay captive under his silent reign, the spirit of Christmas twisted into an annual horror. The town became his domain, each disappearance fueling his power. And each year, the footprints in the snow led nowhere, an empty promise of escape, a reminder of Jacob's unyielding grip over Elkwood's fate.